Now joined by the insiders, Chris Johnston and Pierre Lebrun. Pierre, Prad Treliving says the DNA has to change. What do you make of that?
Yeah, what do you read into that? It came right after speaking to the disappointment of how the Leafs played in Game 5 and Game 7. So he doesn't have his head in the sand as to what this team has done in the big games here over the last decade. And let's remember, this is Brad Treliving's second year. He hasn't lived all this playoff scarring, as he referred to it. But with Brendan Shanahan gone, which he talked about, it's very difficult on Brad Treliving to lose the guy who hired him. But it also frees him of the Shanahan plan. He does not have to be as loyal to this core, to anyone on this roster, as Brendan Shanahan was. This is now Brad Treliving's team more than ever. And when he says the DNA has to change, I think that's what he's going to attempt to do.
Well, if Mitch Marner leaves, things are going to change. It's going to feel different. Treliving joked he was surprised it took 3 questions to get to questions about Marner. Chris, when he did answer the questions about Marner, what do you make of how he handled it?
I was surprised by how nice he was, frankly. And look, I get it. It's still a month till July 1st, and there's a lot of things that can happen in that period of time. But let's face it, Marner has refused to negotiate with the Leafs. He refused to be traded by the Leafs, and he refused to say he wants to be part of the Leafs moving forward at multiple junctures in this season, including last week. And so everything points to him becoming the rare superstar NHL player who is going to hit free agency. And in this case, he's choosing not to sign with his hometown team. And so, I think in that case, it's going to be incumbent upon the Leafs to how they message that, how they handle that. I do appreciate, Brad Treliving mentions it's an emotional time. He's told Mitch that they want to let things die down and see where things end up. But, the writing is on the wall here. And, I have to believe that the main reason not to maybe agitate a little further in that direction is we have to see if there's still a chance for the Leafs to work with Marner's camp on what would be a sign and trade. Trading his rights to another team. Maybe they can get something tangible back then to at least salvage something here. But at this point, it doesn't look that way. It looks like Mitch Marner is very intent on going to July 1st, walking out the door, and that would leave the Leafs with nothing in return.
Another core player is Morgan Rielly, who has had more playoff scarring than Morgan Rielly, the veteran defenseman of the Toronto Maple Leafs. People have wondered, could the Leafs go to him and ask him to waive his no move to try and bring more DNA change? The answer is no chance from what we understand. Morgan Rielly has a full no move. He loves being a Leaf. That's certainly absolutely his right to evoke the no trade. That's why you negotiate 1-year deals. So I don't think that needs to be a talking point going forward here.
And Treliving said he felt that Rielly started playing better as the season progressed. This is the first time we heard from Treliving since the season ended and since the Brendan Shanahan news broke. Pierre, how do you think things are going to change for Treliving now with this new relationship?
So I know a lot of people are wondering why it took so long for the Leafs GM to meet the media. Part of it is that he wanted to have a series of meetings with his new day-to-day boss, Keith Pelly. As he said today, they don't really have a relationship. It is starting now. And so they did have those meetings. And I think that Brad Treliving came out of those meetings having a better understanding of what his life is going to be like now. I think he's comfortable with what he heard from Keith Pelly. But let's also be real about this. They're in the infancy of that relationship. This is a big 12 months between the MLSE CEO and the GM of the Leafs.
And as this infancy grows into something that's working day to day, I'm just curious where Craig Berube ends up in the sort of hierarchy here. And maybe there's no change, right? Brad Treliving mentioned he's had a great relationship with Berube during their time here, a year together. Praised certainly the work he did and believes he has a team playing in a style that will ultimately bring success. But Craig Berube also had dinner with Keith Pelly, right? It's not always, the normal course of business after a season that ownership's representatives meeting with the coach. Pelly spoke a lot about what a resource he thinks Berube can be as a former Stanley Cup winner. And so, we'll see when the dust settles. I don't think there's anything that can be, guessed at this point in time, but maybe he ends up as one of those coaches with a bit more of a say in personnel matters ultimately. Brad Treliving's at the top of that chain, but, the voices are changing, right? The room is changing, and that's something we'll have to get a feel for as time goes on.
Treliving was at his daughter's graduation last week in Calgary, which is why he wasn't at Keith Pelly's news conference. He apologized to us for making us wait to hear from him, but he made it worth our while. He spoke for almost 50 minutes here today. He did a formal news conference and then an informal scrum.